Hello guys, Joker the Fool here, back at it again with another review. This is Superkiller. This is of course Vito's entry into the comic book scene, and it took years for him to get this book out. So I was very fortunate in not having back this book, but a digital version of this book did get released. As of course a black and white digital version. So that's what I am going to be reviewing for this little fun review of Superkiller, the first issue. We'll see if the second one ever materializes. And based on what I read, not really that interested in where Superkiller is going. But anyways, this is of course Vito's comic that he wrote. Keir Lebao is the artist. Valentino Pinto is the colorist. And since I have the black and white version, I won't comment on the coloring. And Eric Weathers is the letterer. And of course, he does fantastic work in lettering. And this really is a very typical trope-filled story by Vito, taking a lot of tropes from American comics and manga and kind of blending them together. I wouldn't say into a mess, just something that just really is. And it really doesn't miss, I'd say, it doesn't really hit a good mark. It just, I'd say, simply just has these collection of like sometimes interesting ideas, sometimes some lines that feel like they would be funny, but most of it just feels like, I'd say, very mediocre. And this really is the story of Superkiller. His name is Sam. He's this like multiverse hitman that goes around killing random heroes, and of course he's tasked with killing Meteor Man. You can see him, and this is of course like the very trope-filled Superman character. You see, you got the old-timey gray tone here. It actually is, I would say, pretty good with the black and white. And of course, you've got this pretty good mix of like this manga style here as well. I'd say drawing of the hands are a little bit weak, and this is where I say Lebeau's art is really just there to propel the story along. It doesn't feel like significant or really stand out good. It just really is. And this whole story really just is, rather than being something that really gets you invested. Even the fact that this is a meaty 70-page issue. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on in this, but it really is just establishing these two characters of Superkiller, and of course this is Beck, who becomes his sidekick, basically. And it just is very much, like I said, very trope-filled, very much just taking, I would say, the most, I'd say, overdone aspects of American comics and manga and just kind of mixing them together. More so American comics than manga. You do have some things in like just the lettering of the manga style, stuff like that is much more typical of manga. But this is really just it's got very much so like an American comic sort of story with the multiverse and the ridiculously named superheroes like Meteor Man. And then, of course, you've got humor that just really doesn't miss the mark, or it doesn't really hit the mark, I ought to say. Like Sam being the Saudi crusader, and then him talking about having 8 wives when, of course, Muslims are only allowed to have 4. Muhammad was the only one who was able to have more than 4 wives. It's a little bit of oversight there, but still, it's the caricature of like robbing a bank and stuff like that, and it just feels very, very much like out of the mind of a 15-year-old rather than someone who's really doing like a good satire. And that's what you would really need for this character to work, and I don't think Vito has the writing chops to do this he didn't have the writing chops to do this in this first issue, I would say, and I don't think he would have the writing chops to do this as an ongoing series. And like I said, the art doesn't really save it. You see, these whole page spreads and such. Of course, I think there's one that comes on a little bit later in, if I can find it, but even so, none of it really feels like it just hits the mark. Like even this, like here looks kind of nice, but it's not like like that really draws the story together. It just is. So then this is supposed to be the most climactic portion of the story, and then of course it cools down. You have this like apocalyptic event where the entire universe of this like multiverse ends, and then Beck becomes the sidekick because he has feelings of remorse for destroying her universe or whatever. And then it ends with like this is like the tropey manga scene where if you go at the end there with the creative censoring where he's like on her naked body, he thinks he's like committing essay. I'll try to be YouTube friendly, and then you've got like literal scenes where he's being like burned at the stake, right? Stuff like that. It just feels very over the top, very overdone, and it's being done to try and be funny, where you're putting these things in, linking them all together, and thinking you'll have something that's really funny and hilarious, where and something that is like a good satire of the genre of American comics and manga, where it just really feels like a bunch of ideas an edgy 15-year-old came up with and attempted to be funny. The lettering is really good. Eric Weathers does a fantastic job lettering, as he always does with everything he does. It's redundant, but every page that Eric Weathers touches in terms of the lettering always looks spot on. So it does make this comic very readable in that sense. But is it a comic you're going to want to read? Probably not. I'm glad I didn't actually pay money for this, and I'm also glad that I wasn't that invested in Superkiller ever coming out. And as a series, like, you might want to pick it up and read it for like a couple of issues. But I imagine like any person who's like, I don't know, not a teenage boy is going to get tired of Superkiller by, before there's enough content for a one trade paperback. Maybe with, these 70 pages, maybe it might be like after the first trade. So let's say a trade paperback is like 150 pages or so. By like issue 4, you probably would want to put it down and just not read it anymore, because I just can't see this getting any better. I don't think it's going to get like worse. I think you'll have some stuff that could be interesting. There could be this dynamic between Beck and Superkiller, with Beck being Superkiller's sidekick and them going on all these adventures. But it just relies on Vito having these good, fresh ideas. It relies, I think, on him being able to be satirical in a way that isn't just outright edgy, right? And you can be edgy. It's something that can work, but it's not necessarily something that works if you're doing it for the sake of it. And of course, that's really, I think, what Vito is going for with Superkiller, or at least whether subconsciously or consciously. I think that's what he's going for, and I think it's going to turn a lot of people off for this first issue, and then for any of the issues if they do materialize. But anyways, I'm going to end it here. If you hear a car alarm, I'm sorry about that. But hopefully you guys enjoy this interview regardless. Joker is out. Thank you for being in the Velvet Room with Joker the Fool. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, whether you're listening on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or Substack. And be sure to subscribe to my Substack, velvetroompublishing.substack.com, to keep up with Machine to Man and all my other projects.